Hello, hello! It is the return! How are you guys doing? It feels like it's been so long. 2 weeks is a long time. Ooh, let's see how everyone's doing in the chat. Hello, Alyssa! Hello, The Real Thing! Hello, Tommy! Oh, let me see. I'm being nosy. I'm eavesdropping with my eyeballs. Let's see, getting better. Yay, I'm glad you're getting better, Tommy. Got a new ferocious beast today. She's a whole 8 pounds of bad attitude, and I absolutely love her. Her name is Daisy. Oh my gosh, what is Daisy? I gotta know. It is the birthday. I am a birthday girl, right? Can you believe it? Y'all, I'm 40. Can you believe it? That's so crazy to me, but also I'm just so grateful for it. Like, every decade that I live through, I think that, you know, that's kind of like going to be the best decade. Like, oh, like the 20s, you know, the 20s are your best time of your life or something. And then I hit 30s and I was like, oh, 30s are way better than 20s. So I'm excited. I'm excited for this because it seems to level up. I'm enjoying just the privilege of growing older. A long-haired chihuahua who was dumped in the night. Oh, I hate that she was dumped in the night, but I am so glad that, as always, that she is with you. I almost remember 40, but it was so long ago. Cranberry shirt. Oh, you're from Ireland. What part are you from? I don't know. You might know this, The Real Thing, but Dolores from the Cranberries was a dear friend and a kind of a mentor for me. So I saw this shirt and I was like, oh, I have to have it. She was wonderful. She's from Limerick girl. That's very cool that you're from Ireland as well. How are you 40? You look like younger than that. Thank you. I can never tell. I can never tell what I actually look like. And she was freaking amazing. She left her mark on all of humanity as far as I'm concerned. The world loves Dolores. All right, guys. Well, I will check back in the chat because I am super interested in what part of Ireland you are from, The Real Thing. Poor baby girl puppy, totally. I'm so glad that she's with you, though. Now she's safe. Now she is safe. A whole 8 pounds of bad attitude. Sounds like my kind of girl. All right. Chapter 6. Oh, let's see. She's been terrorizing Paco all day. Oh, poor Paco. Oh my gosh, that's funny. His adjustment will be a fun thing to watch. She knows. Okay. Chapter 6. Humpty Dumpty. However, the egg only got larger and larger and more human. When she had come within a few yards of it, she saw that it had eyes and a nose and mouth, and when she had come close to it, she saw clearly that it was Humpty Dumpty himself. "It can't be anyone else," she said to herself, "as I'm certain of it, as if his name were written all over his face." It might have been written 100 times easily on that enormous face. Humpty Dumpty was sitting with his legs crossed like a Turk on the top of a high wall, such a narrow one that Alice quite wondered how he could keep his balance, and as his eyes were steadily fixed in the opposite direction, he hadn't taken the least notice of her. She thought he must be a stuffed figure after all. "And how exactly like an egg he is," she said aloud, standing with her hands ready to catch him, for she was every moment expecting him to fall. "It's very provoking," Humpty Dumpty said after a long silence, looking away from Alice as he spoke, "to be called an egg, very." "Oh, I said you looked like an egg, sir," Alice gently explained. "And some eggs are very pretty, you know," she added, hoping to turn her remark into some sort of compliment. "Some people," said Humpty Dumpty, looking away from her as usual, "have no more sense than a baby." Alice didn't know what to say to this. It wasn't at all like conversation, she thought, and he never said anything to her. In fact, his last remark was evidently addressed to a tree, so she stood and softly repeated herself. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty in his place again. That line is much too long for poetry. Oh, sorry, that was Alice. That last line is much too long for poetry, she added, almost out loud, forgetting that Humpty Dumpty would hear her. Don't stand chattering to yourself like that, Humpty Dumpty said, looking at her for a long time. But tell me your name and your business. My name is Alice, but it's a stupid name enough, Humpty Dumpty interrupted her impatiently. What does it mean? Must a name mean something? Alice asked doubtfully. Of course it must, Humpty Dumpty said with a short laugh. My name means the shape I am, and a good handsome shape it is too. With a name like yours, you might be any shape almost. Why do you sit out here all alone? Said Alice, not wishing to begin an argument. Why, because there's nobody with me, cried Humpty Dumpty. Did you think I didn't know the answer to that? Ask another. Don't you think you'd be safer down on the ground? Alice went on, not with any idea of making another riddle, but simply in her good-natured anxiety for the queer creature. That wall is so very narrow. What tremendously easy riddles you ask, Humpty Dumpty growled out. Of course I don't think so. Why, if I ever did fall off, which there's no chance of, but if I did... Here he pursed his lips and looked so solemn and grand that Alice could hardly help but laughing. If I did fall, he went on, the king has promised me... you may turn pale if you like. You didn't think I was going to say that, did you? Anyway, the king has promised me, with his very own mouth, to send all the king's horses and all his men... Alice interrupted rather unwisely. Now I declare that's too bad, Humpty Dumpty cried, breaking into a sudden passion. You've been listening at doors and behind trees and down chimneys, or you wouldn't have known it. I haven't indeed, Alice said gently. It's in a book. Well, they may write such things in a book, Humpty Dumpty said, in a calmer tone. That's what you call a history of England, that is. Now, take a good look at me. I'm the one that has spoken to a king, I am. Mayhap you'll never see such another. And to show you that I'm not proud, you may shake hands with me. And he grinned almost from ear to ear as he leant forwards, and as nearly as possible fell off the wall in doing so, and offered Alice his hand. She watched him a little anxiously as she took it. If he smiles much more, the ends of his mouth might meet behind, she thought, and then I don't know what would happen to his head. I'm afraid it would come off. Yes, all the king's horses and all of his men, Humpty Dumpty went on. They'd pick me up in a minute, and they would. However, this conversation has gone on a little too fast. Let's go back to the last remark but one. I'm afraid I can't quite remember it, Alice said politely. In that case, we start afresh, said Humpty Dumpty, and it's my turn to choose a subject. He talks about it just as if it was a game, thought Alice. So, here's a question for you. How old did you say you were? Alice made a short calculation and said, 7 years and 6 months. Wrong, Humpty Dumpty exclaimed triumphantly. You never said a word like it. I thought you meant how old are you? Alice exclaimed. If I'd meant that, I'd have said it, said Humpty Dumpty. Alice didn't want to begin another argument, so she said nothing. 7 years and 6 months, Humpty Dumpty repeated thoughtfully. An uncomfortable sort of age. Now, if you asked my advice, I'd have said leave off at 7, but it's too late now. I never ask advice about growing, Alice said indignantly. Too proud? The other inquired.
Alice felt even more indignant at this suggestion. "I mean," she said, "that one can't help but growing older." "One can't, perhaps," said Humpty Dumpty, "but two can. With proper assistance, you might have left off at 7. "What a beautiful belt you've got on," Alice suddenly remarked. They had quite enough of the subject of age, she thought, and if they really were to take turns in choosing subjects, it was her turn now. At least, she corrected herself on second thoughts, a beautiful cravat. I should have said, no, a belt, I mean. I beg your pardon. She added in dismay, for Humpty Dumpty looked thoroughly offended, and she began to wish that she hadn't chosen such a subject. If only I knew, she thought to herself, which was neck and which was waist. Evidently, Humpty Dumpty was very angry, though he said nothing for a minute or two. When he did speak again, it was in a deep growl. "It is a most provoking thing," he said at last, "when a person doesn't know a cravat from a belt." "I know it's very ignorant of me," Alice said in so humble a tone that Humpty Dumpty relented. "It is, really. It's a cravat, child, and a beautiful one, as you say. It was a present from the White King and Queen. There now." "Is it really?" said Alice, quite pleased to find that she had chosen a good subject after all. "They gave it to me," Humpty Dumpty continued thoughtfully as he crossed one knee over the other and clasped his hands round it. "They gave me it for an unbirthday present." "I beg your pardon?" Alice said with a puzzled air. "I'm not offended," said Humpty Dumpty. "No, I mean, what is an unbirthday present?" "A present that is given when it isn't your birthday, of course." Alice considered a little. "I think I like birthday presents best," she said at last. "You don't know what you're talking about," cried Humpty Dumpty. "How many days are there in a year?" 365, said Alice. "And how many birthdays have you?" "Well, 1. "And if you take 1 from 365, what remains?" "Well, 364, of course." Humpty Dumpty looked doubtful. "I'd rather see that done on paper," he said. Alice couldn't help smiling as she took out her memorandum book and worked the sum for him. 365 minus 1 equals 364. Humpty Dumpty took the book and looked at it carefully. "That seems to be done right," he began. "You're holding it upside down," Alice interrupted. "To be sure I was," Humpty Dumpty said as she turned it round for him. "I thought it looked a little queer. As I was saying, this seems to be done right, though I haven't the time to look it over thoroughly just now, and that shows that there are 364 days when you might get unbirthday presents." "Certainly," said Alice. "And only 1 for birthday presents, you know. There's glory for you." "I don't know what you mean by glory," Alice said. Humpty Dumpty smiled contemptuously. "Of course you don't, till I tell you. I meant there's a nice knock-down argument for you." "But glory doesn't mean a nice knock-down argument," Alice objected. "When I use a word," Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, "it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less." "The question is," said Alice, "whether you can make words mean so many different things." "The question is," said Humpty Dumpty, "which is to be master. That's all." Alice was much too puzzled to say anything, so after a minute Humpty Dumpty began again. "They've a temper, some of them, particularly verbs. They're the proudest and adjectives you can do anything with, but not verbs. However, I can manage the whole lot of them. Impenetrably, that's what I say." "Impenetrability," that's what he said. "Impenetrability, that's what I say." Would you tell me, please, said Alice, what that means? Now you talk like a reasonable child, said Humpty Dumpty, looking very much pleased. I meant by impenetrability that we've had enough of that subject, and it wouldn't be just as well if you'd mentioned what you mean to do next, as I suppose that you don't mean to stop here all the rest of your life. That's a great deal to make one word mean, Alice said in a thoughtful tone. When I make a word do a lot of work like that, said Humpty Dumpty, I always pay it extra. Oh, said Alice. She was much too puzzled to make any other remark. You should see 'em come round me as of Saturday nights, Humpty Dumpty went on, wagging his head gravely from side to side, for to get their wages, you know. Alice didn't venture what to ask, as to ask what he paid them with, and so you see, I can't tell you. You seem very, very clear at explaining words, sir, said Alice. Would you kindly tell me the meaning of the poem Jabberwocky? Let's hear it, said Humpty Dumpty. I can explain all the poems that ever were invented, and a good many that haven't been invented just yet. This sounded very hopeful, so Alice repeated the first verse. 'Twas Brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe, and mimsy were all the borogoves, and the mome rats outgrabe. That's enough to begin with, Humpty Dumpty interrupted. There are plenty of hard words in there. Brillig means 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the time when you begin broiling things for dinner. Oh, that'll do very well, said Alice. And slithy? Well, slithy means lithe and slimy. Lithe is the same as active. You see, it's like a portmanteau. There are 2 meanings packed up into one word. Oh, I see it now, Alice remarked thoughtfully. And what are toves? Well, toves are something like badgers. They're something like lizards, and there's something like corkscrews. They must be very curious-looking creatures. That they are, said Humpty Dumpty. Also, they make their nests under sundials also, and they live on cheese. Oh, and what's gyre and gimble? To gyre is to go round and round like a gyroscope. To gimble is to make holes like a gimlet. And the wabe is the grass plot round the sundial, I suppose, said Alice, surprised at her own ingenuity. Of course it is. It's called a wabe, you know, because it goes a very long way before it, and a long way behind it. And a long way beyond it on each side, Alice added. Exactly so. Well then, mimsy is flimsy and miserable. There's another portmanteau for you. And a borogove is a thin, shabby-looking bird with its feathers sticking out all round, something like a live mop. Oh, and then mome rats, said Alice. I'm afraid I'm giving you a great deal of trouble. Well, a rat is a sort of green pig, but a mome I'm not certain about. I think it's short for from home, meaning that they'd lost their way, you know. And what does outgrabe mean? Well, outgribing is something between bellowing and whistling, with a kind of sneeze in the middle, however. You'll hear it done, maybe, down in the wood yonder, and when you've heard it, once you've heard it, you'll be quite content. Who's been repeating all of this hard stuff to you, anyway? Oh, I read it in a book, said Alice, but I had some poetry repeated to me much easier than that by, Tweedledee, I think it was. As to poetry, you know, said Humpty Dumpty, stretching out one of his great hands, I can repeat poetry as well as other folk, if it comes to that. "Oh, it needn't come to that," Alice hastily said, hoping for him to keep it from the beginning. "The piece I'm going to repeat," he went on without noticing her remark, "was written entirely for your amusement." Alice felt that in this case she really ought to listen to it, so she sat down and said, "Thank you," but rather sadly. "In winter, when the fields are white, I sing this song for your delight. Only I don't sing it," he added in an explanation. "I see that you don't," said Alice. "If you can see whether I'm singing or not, you've sharper eyes than most," Humpty Dumpty remarked severely. Alice was silent. "In spring, when woods are getting green, I'll try and tell you what I mean." "Thank you very much," said Alice. "In summer, when the days are long, perhaps you'll understand this song. In autumn, when the leaves are brown, take pen and ink and write it down." I will if I can remember it so long," said Alice. "You needn't go making remarks like that," Humpty Dumpty said. "They're not sensible and they put me out." "I sent a message to the fish. I told them, this is what I wish. The little fishes of the sea, they sent an answer back to me. The little fishes' answer was, 'We cannot do it, sir, because—'" "I'm afraid I don't quite understand," said Alice. "It gets easier further on," Humpty Dumpty replied. "I sent them again to say it will be better to obey. The fishes answered with a grin, 'Why, what a temper you are in!' I told them once, I told them twice, that they would not listen to advice. I took a kettle large and new, fit for the deed I had to do. My heart went hop, my heart went thump, I filled the kettle at the pump. Then someone came to me and said, 'The little fishes, they're in bed.' I said to him, I said it plain, 'Then you must wake them up again.' I said it very loud and clear, I went and shouted in his ear." Humpty Dumpty raised his voice almost to a scream as he repeated this verse, and Alice thought, with a shudder, "I wouldn't have been a messenger for anything." "But he was very stiff and proud. He said, 'You needn't shout so loud.' And he was very proud and stiff. He'd said, 'I'd go and wake them if.' I took a corkscrew from the shelf. I went to wake them up myself. And when I found the door was locked, I pulled and pushed and kicked and knocked. And when I found the door was shut, I tried to turn the handle, but—" There was a long pause. "Is that all?" Alice timidly asked. "That is all," said Humpty Dumpty. "Goodbye." This was rather sudden, Alice thought, but after such a very strong hint that she ought to be going, she felt that it would hardly be civil to stay. So she got up, and she held out her hand. "Goodbye, till we meet again," she said cheerfully as she could. "I shouldn't know you again if we did meet," Humpty Dumpty replied in a discontented tone, giving her one of his fingers to shake. "You're so exactly like other people." The face is what one goes by generally," Alice remarked in a thoughtful tone. "That's just what I complain of," said Humpty Dumpty. "Your face is the same as everybody has. 2 eyes, so," marking their places in the air with his thumb, "a nose in the middle, mouth under. It's just always the same. Now, if you had 2 eyes on the same side of your nose, for instance, or the mouth on the top, now that would be some help." "But it wouldn't look nice," Alice objected, but Humpty Dumpty only shut his eyes and said, "Wait till you've tried." Alice waited a minute to see if he would speak again, but as he never opened his eyes or took any further notice of her, she said, "Goodbye," once more, and getting to no answer to this, she quietly walked away. But she couldn't help saying to herself as she went, "Of all of the unsatisfactory—" She repeated this aloud, as it was a great comfort to have such a long word to say. "Of all of the unsatisfactory people I ever met." She never finished the sentence, for at this moment a heavy crash shook the forest from end to end. Okay, chapter 7. Let me check time. Cool. We've got 30 minutes left. So it seems like we get 2 chapters out of every stream on this book. So that's kind of cool. I'm going to take a quick drink. Is everything okay? Is the stream okay? Is the audio okay? Let me know. I'll peek back at the chat in just a moment. Chapter 7. The Lion and the Unicorn. Yes, all good? Thanks, Tommy. The Lion and the Unicorn. The next moment, soldiers came running through the wood, at first in 2s and 3s, then 10 or 20 together, and at last in such crowds that they seemed to fill the whole forest. Alice got behind a tree for fear of being run over and watched them go by. Okay, cool. Thanks, the real thing. She thought that in all her life she had never seen soldiers so uncertain on their feet. They were always tripping over something or other, and whenever one went down, several more always fell over him, so that the ground was covered in little heaps of men. Then came the horses. Having 4 feet, these managed rather better than the foot soldiers, but even they stumbled now and then, and it seemed to be a regular rule that, whenever a horse stumbled, the rider fell off instantly. The confusion got worse every moment, and Alice was very glad to get out of the wood and into an open place, where she found the White King seated on the ground, busily writing in his memorandum book. "I've sent them all," the king cried in a tone of delight on seeing Alice. "Did you happen to meet any soldiers, my dear, as you came through the wood?" "Yes, I did," said Alice. "Several thousand, I should think." 4,207. That's the exact number, the king said, referring to his book. "I couldn't send all the horses, you know, because 2 of them are wanted in the game, and I haven't sent the 2 messengers either. They're both gone to the town. Just look along the road and tell me, can you see either of them?" "I see nobody on the road," said Alice. "I only wish I had such eyes," the king remarked in a fretful tone, "to be able to see nobody, and at that distance, too. Why, it's as much as I can do to see real people by this light." All of this was lost on Alice, who was still looking intently along the road, shading her eyes with one hand. "I see somebody now," she exclaimed at last, "but he's coming very slowly, and what curious attitudes he goes into." For the messenger kept skipping up and down and wriggling like an eel as he came along, with his great hands spread out like fans on each side. "Not at all," said the king. "He's an Anglo-Saxon messenger, and those are Anglo-Saxon attitudes. He only does with them when he's happy. His name is Haiga." It looks like Haiga, but then it tells you how it's pronounced. He pronounced it so as to rhyme with mayor. So, hair, I guess, but it's spelled like Haigha. So I don't know why that rhymes with mayor. I love my love with an H," Alice couldn't help beginning, "because he is happy. I hate him with an H, because he is hideous. I fed him with ham sandwiches and hay. His name is Haya, and he lives..." Hold on, I got an itch in my throat, and it's like gonna turn into a cough. Excuse me, guys. It was one of those tickles that I thought I could kill by just powering through, and it is not. I've got tears in my eyes. Sorry. Okay. Excuse me. All right. His name is Haya, and he lives on a hill, the king remarked simply, without the least idea that he was joining the game, while Alice was still hesitating for the name of a town beginning with H. "The other messenger's called Hatter. I must have 2, you know, to come and go. 1 to come and one to go. I beg your pardon, said Alice.
Oh, let's see. I meant to say earlier, but didn't want to. Oh, Lurgan. Okay. I don't know where that is. I'll have to look that up. Thanks for telling us.
Okay. I beg your pardon, Alice said. It isn't respectable to beg, said the king. I only meant that I didn't understand, said Alice. Why one to come and one to go? Don't I tell you, the king repeated impatiently, I must have two to fetch and carry, one to fetch, one to carry. At this moment the messenger arrived, and he was far too much out of breath to say a word, and could only wave his hands about and make the most fearful faces at the poor king. The young lady loves you with an H, the king said, introducing Alice in the hope of turning off the messenger's attentions from himself. But it was of no use. The Anglo-Saxon attitudes only got more extraordinary every moment, while the great eyes rolled wildly from side to side. You alarm me, said the king. I feel faint. Give him a hand sandwich. On which the messenger, to Alice's great amusement, opened a bag that hung round his neck and handed a sandwich to the king, who devoured it greedily. Another sandwich, said the king. There's nothing left but hay left now, the messenger said, peeping into the bag. Hay, then, the king murmured in a faint whisper. Alice was glad to see that it revived him a good deal. There's nothing like eating hay when you're faint. Oh, sorry, that was the king. There's nothing like eating hay when you're faint, he remarked to her as he munched away. I should think throwing cold water over you would do better, Alice suggested, or some sal volatile. I didn't say there was nothing better, the king replied. I said that there was nothing like it, which Alice did not venture to deny. Who did you pass down on the road? The king went on, holding out his hand to a messenger for some hay. Nobody, said the messenger. Quite right, said the king. This young lady saw him too, so of course nobody walks slower than you. I do me best, the messenger said in a sullen tone. I'm sure nobody walks much faster than I do, your majesty. He can't do that, said the king, or else he'd have been here first. However, now you've got your breath, you may tell us what happened in town. I'll whisper it, said the messenger, putting his hands to his mouth in the shape of a trumpet and stooping so as to get close to the king's ear. Alice was sorry for this, as she wanted to hear the news too. However, instead of whispering, he simply shouted at the top of his voice, They're at it again! Do you call that a whisper? Cried the poor king, jumping up and shaking himself. If you do such a thing again, I'll have you buttered. It went through and through my head like an earthquake. It would have been a very tiny earthquake, though, thought Alice. Who are at it again? She ventured to ask. Why, the lion and the unicorn, of course. Fighting for the crown? Yes, to be sure, said the king. And the best of the joke is that it's my crown all the while. Let's run and see them. And they trotted off, Alice repeating to herself as she ran the words of the old song. The lion and the unicorn were fighting for the crown. The lion beat the unicorn all around the town. Some gave them white bread and some gave them brown. Some gave them plum cake and drummed them out of town. Does the one that wins get the crown? She asked as well as she could, for the run was putting her quite out of breath. Dear me, no, said the king. What an idea! Would you be good enough, Alice panted out after running a little further, to stop just a minute, just to get one's breath again? I'm good enough, said the king. I'm not only strong enough, you see. A minute goes by so fearfully quickly. You might as well try to stop a bandersnatch. Alice had no more breath for talking, so they trotted on in silence till they came into sight of a great crowd, in the middle of which the lion and the unicorn were fighting. They were in such a cloud of dust that at first Alice could not make out which was which, but soon she managed to distinguish the unicorn by his horn. They placed themselves close to where Hatter, the other messenger, was standing watching the fight with a cup of tea in one hand and a piece of bread and butter in the other. He's only just out of prison. He hadn't finished his tea when he got sent in, Haya whispered to Alice. And they only give them oyster shells in there, so you see he's very hungry and thirsty. How are you, dear child? He went on, putting his arm affectionately round Hatter's neck. Hatter looked round and nodded, and went on with his bread and butter. Were you happy in prison, dear child? Said Haya. Hatter looked round once more and said a time or two. This time a tear trickled down his cheek, but not a word would he say. Speak, can't you? Haya cried impatiently, but Hatter only munched away and drank some more tea. Speak, won't you? Cried the king. How are they getting on with the fight? Hatter made a desperate effort and swallowed a large piece of bread and butter. Well, they're getting on very well, he said in kind of a choking voice. Each of them has been down about 87 times. Then I suppose they'll soon bring the white bread and then the brown, Alice ventured to remark. It's waiting for 'em now, said Hatter. This is a bit of it I'm eating right now. There was a pause in the fight just then, and the lion and the unicorn sat down, panting, while the king called out, 10 minutes allowed for refreshments. Haya and Hatter sat down to work at once, carrying round trays of white and brown bread. Alice took a piece to taste, but it was very dry. I don't think they'll fight any more today, the king said to Hatter. Go and order the drums to begin. And Hatter went bounding away like a grasshopper. For a minute or two, Alice stood silent, watching them. Suddenly she brightened up. Look! Look! She cried, pointing eagerly. There's the White Queen running across the country. She came flying out of the wood over yonder. How fast those queens can run! There's some enemy after her, no doubt, the king said, without even looking round. That wood's full of 'em. But aren't you going to run and help her? Alice asked, very much surprised at his taking it so quietly. No use, said the king. She runs so fearfully quick. You might as well try to catch a bandersnatch. But I'll make a memorandum about her, if you like. She's a good and dear creature, he repeated softly to himself as he opened his memorandum book. Do you spell creature with a double E? Hold on. At this moment, the unicorn sauntered by them with his hands in his pockets. The unicorn has pockets. With his hand in his pockets. I had the best of it this time, he said to the king, just glancing at him as he passed. A little, the king replied rather nervously. You shouldn't run him through your horn, you know. Didn't hurt him, the unicorn said carelessly as he was going on, when his eye happened to fall upon Alice. He turned round instantly and stood for some time looking at her with the air of deepest disgust. What is this? He said at last. This is a child, Haya replied eagerly, coming in front of Alice to introduce her, and spreading out both hands towards her in an Anglo-Saxon attitude. We only found it today. It's large as life and twice as natural. I always thought they were fabulous monsters, said the unicorn. Is it alive? It can talk, said Haya solemnly. The unicorn looked dreamily at Alice and said, Talk, child. Alice could not help her lips curling up into a smile as she began. Do you know, I always thought unicorns were fabulous monsters too. I never saw one alive before. Well, "Now that we have seen each other," said the unicorn, "if you'll believe in me, I'll believe in you. Is that a bargain?" "Yes, if you like," said Alice. "Come, fetch out the old plum cake, man," said the unicorn, turning from her to the king. "None of your brown bread for me." "Certainly, certainly," said the king muttered, and beckoned to Haya. "Open the bag," he whispered. "Quick, not that one, that's full of hay." Haya took a large cake out of the bag and gave it to Alice to hold, while he got out a dish and a carving knife. How they all came out of it, Alice couldn't guess. It was just like a conjuring trick, she thought. The lion had joined them while this was going on. He looked very tired and sleepy, and his eyes were half shut. "What's this?" he said, blinking lazily at Alice, and speaking in a deep, hollow tone that sounded like the tolling of a great bell. "Ah, what is it now?" the unicorn cried eagerly. "You'll never guess. I couldn't." The lion looked at Alice wearily. "Are you animal, or vegetable, or mineral?" he said, yawning at every other word. "It's a fabulous monster," the unicorn cried out before Alice could reply. "Then hand round the plum cake, monster," the lion said, lying down and putting his chin on his paws, "and sit down, both of you," to the king and to the unicorn. "Fair play with this cake, you know." The king was evidently very uncomfortable at having to sit down between the two great creatures, but there was no other place for him. "What a fight we might have had for the crown now," the unicorn said, looking slyly up at the crown, which the poor king was nearly shaking off of his head, he trembled so much. "I should win easily," said the lion. "I'm not so sure of that," said the unicorn. "Why, I beat you up all round the town, you chicken," the lion replied angrily, half getting up as he spoke. Here the king interrupted to prevent the quarrel going on. He was very nervous, and his voice quite quivered. "All round the town," he said. "That's a good long way. Did you go by the old bridge, or the market-place? You get the best view by that old bridge." "I'm sure I don't know," the lion growled out as he laid down again. "There was too much dust to see anything. What a time the monster is, cutting up that cake." Alice had seated herself on the bank of a little brook, with the great dish on her knees, and she was sawing away diligently with her knife. "It's very provoking," she said in reply to the lion. She was getting quite used to being called the monster. "I've cut several slices already, but they always join on again." You don't know how to manage the looking-glass cakes," the unicorn remarked. "Hand it round first, and then cut it afterwards." This sounded nonsense, but Alice very obediently got up and carried the dish round, and the cake divided itself into 3 pieces as she did so. "Now cut it up," said the lion as she returned to her place with the empty dish. "I say, this isn't fair," cried the unicorn as Alice sat with the knife in her hand, very much puzzled as to how to begin. "The monster has given the lion twice as much as me." "She kept none for herself anyhow," said the lion. "Do you like plum cake, monster?" But before Alice could answer him, the drums began. Where the noise came from she couldn't make out. The air seemed full of it, and rang through and through her head till she felt quite deafened. She started to her feet and sprang across the little brook in her terror, and had just time to see the lion and the unicorn rise to their feet with angry looks as being interrupted in their feast, before she dropped to her knees and put her hands over her ears, vainly trying to shut out this dreadful uproar. "If that doesn't drum them out of town," she thought to herself, "nothing ever will."
Okay, chapter 8. Let's check for time. 10 minutes. So we can do one more chapter or we can call it for tonight. If we do one more chapter, we'll probably be another 30 minutes, and our stream normally ends at 6. So you want to just do 2 chapters next time? Let me know what you want. I'm happy to stay for another chapter if you want. Although I am kind of hungry for dinner. Let me know in the chat what you guys want to do. And let me kind of read. Let's see. Oh, nice. I've been wanting to go to Ireland but can't afford it. Yeah, it's so expensive to travel right now. It's a lovely place. Maybe one day you'll get there. Yeah. Whichever you want. I'm happy to wait. I think I'm going to eat dinner. I'm starving, Marvin. And I'm always like kind of paranoid. This is probably TMI. I'm always kind of paranoid when I start getting hungry on stream that my stomach is just going to growl directly into that mic. I don't think anybody wants to hear my digestive system just growling away. Go eat. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you. All right. I know. I hate being hungry. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much. And again, I'm so glad you're feeling better, Tommy. And I'm excited to hear of the further adventures of Daisy and Paco. That should be interesting. And I'm so happy that Daisy has a good home now. That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. And it was great to see you all again. It's funny, like we've gotten so used to doing this over the last, however many months that it's been at this point that I really miss doing it when I don't do it. I miss you guys. So bye everyone. All right. Have a great night. I will see you on Sunday for Twitch. If you guys, if any of you want to come for Twitch, 1 p.m. on Twitch, PST, as per usual. We're going to continue playing Super Mario Deluxe. Of course, I'm always happy to read for you guys. Thank you for listening and thank you for wanting to be here. So yeah, Twitch 1 p.m. Sunday. Hope to see you guys there. And I will, if not, I'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m.